Today's episode of Today in World War II, February 9th, the Mannerheim Line in Finland in the Summa Sector begins to fall apart. Operation Compass in North Africa ends. FDR enrages probably more than we know without when the internet wasn't around. Most of the population when he instituted daylight savings times for the first time. The very first Chindit operation begins in Burma. The Battle of Anzio gets hotter, and the Brits and the Canucks penetrate the Siegfried Line on the West Wall. Let's get started. All right, so on February 9th, 1940, well, I've been foreshadowing this in the videos for the last, week or so. I've been telling you that the Soviets got smart finally, and they concentrated most of their artillery and their tanks and their heavy weapons and their troops, and they were pounding the Summa sector of the Mannerheim Line. No defensive wall can stand up forever against that concentration of firepower and attack. And it started happening now. The Soviets took control of a very key bunker in the Suma sector of the Mannerheim Line near the village of Karhula. And what can I say? The talk is the clock is ticking now for the Finns. It became a task of holding on by their fingernails as long as they could in the hopes that negotiations would bear fruit with the Soviets, which had already started, by the way. The Soviets had started that about a week or so ago. The hopes that they could negotiate an honorable peace where they would have to give stuff up. It was going to be painful, but the main thing was they did not want to fall under Soviet occupation and lose their democracy, lose their freedom. And I tell you what, it happened twice. It happened in the Winter War. It happened in the continuation war in 1944. Both times they were holding on by their fingertips. And, well, spoiler alert, they were successful both times. But whew, it was really close. Let's put it that way. I know someone that told me that they were hanging on by their fingernails as well when it came to time to decide whether to subscribe to my channel or not. I can tell you that by subscribing to my channel, you're going to have freedom, you're going to have prosperity. I don't know, maybe you will, maybe you won't. I don't know. But I know what'll happen is that it'll help me with the YouTube algorithm and the engagement. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, on February 9th, 1941, uh, the Allied troops captured El-Agheila in Libya, and this was pretty much the high water mark, the end of Operation Compass. I think that it was a very, very successful offensive. I mean, if you think about where they were at when it started, right? The Italians had invaded. They were marching towards the Suez Canal, thinking that they had everything in the palm of their hands. And then the Brits show that they also can do lightning war. Lightning war is very effective against troops that are not motivated or not as trained as yours. And, you know, movement and superior tactics, surprise, demoralization does a really good job of turning a fighting force into a retreating rout. And that's what happened with the Italians. Like I said, they weren't going up against the Africa Corps. They were going up against the Italians. And, but you know what? It's like a sports team when a number one rated team plays a team rated to be 65 in the country. And then, you expect the number one team to win in a walk, in a rout. Well, that's the same thing here. I mean, you expected the British and the Commonwealth forces to do so against the Italians, and they did. So good for them. That was a good job. And what was also a good job was it turns out that the way for the Italian prisoners to curry favor with the Commonwealth forces and the Brits was to like their videos and actually leave comments. And it was very good because, all these comments were like, hey, no, it's very good for us. Thank you very much. But where's the spaghetti? Where's the pasta? I apologize to Italy, Italians, pasta, than anybody else has ever ate Chef Boyardee ragu or ravioli for that horrible Italian accent. But anyway, like the video, leave a comment. That would be awesome. Thank you. On February 9th, 1942, I'm assuming that great swaths of the American population just erupted in a wave of protest and ill will towards Franklin Roosevelt when he signed a law into effect that required the clocks to be moved ahead 1 hour for the rest of the war. We call it daylight savings time. They called it wartime. And of course, they used the same arguments back then as they use now, that it was intended to help conserve fuel and promote national security. Um, Luckily, the internet did not exist back then. I wonder how much, vitriol there would have generated online if there was internet back then. We know how much vitriol every time the clocks go back or back up or go forward or move back happens here in this country. And with the exception of Arizona, which outlawed it. But I just like to, I think somehow the greatest generation handled that a little bit better than how we handle things now. Just a thought. On February 9th, 1943, the very first Chindit operation began. There was this kooky British general in Burma and India, and well, obviously by now the Japanese had occupied all of Burma, and he had this interesting idea that he could move thousands of British troops into Burma behind the Japanese lines, and they could conduct guerrilla operations, and the Japanese strike and then disappear into the jungle and so on and so forth. It was a good idea. And, you wanted to keep the Japanese off balance. He was going against a real obstacle when it came to the terrain, the jungle, the heat, the oppressive humidity, the swamps, the poisonous snakes, you name it, Burma's got it. Listen, not many people are venturing to Burma even now in 2024, because at least not in the jungle mountainous parts. But got to give it handed. I mean, you have to hand it to Wingate. I mean, the Brits didn't stand still. The one thing, um, I would say the best quality of them in World War II was they didn't sit on their hands. They didn't sit around watching the paint dry. And I think this is great. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of casualties. The Americans tried something similar with Merrill's Marauders, which we'll get to later, and they didn't quite have the same amount of success. But regardless, it was a good. I think it was a good thing. On February 9th, 1943. The Battle of Anzio was really heating up. Remember, the Germans had contained the advance mostly because the American General Lucas sat on his ass for the crucial 3 or 4 days after they landed, gave the initiative over to the Germans. So the Germans had attacked, and they were bound and determined to push that beachhead back into the sea. They captured Aprilia from the British 1st Infantry Division. One of the key objects in that battle of Anzio was a place called the Factory. The British were able to hang on to that. But listen, of all of the Allied invasions in Western Europe in the war, this by far was the one that came closest to get pushed back into the sea. Now they almost had the same thing almost happened in Salerno. What were the two common factors here? It was Kesselring was commanding the defense there, and again, really the main thing that saved the Americans and the Brits was the fact that they had the cruisers and the battleships and the destroyers to lend covering fire, and take out a lot of tanks and artillery, because otherwise, it would have been a whole different thing. So it just goes to show you how important naval superiority is and air superiority is when you're trying to invade in hostile territory. And finally, on February 8th, 1945, the Brits and the Canucks forced their way through the main Siegfried Line, which I guess the Germans called the West Wall defensive zone. And there wasn't much left. I mean, it was a shell of what it would have been if it was fully manned, and they weren't, if the Germans hadn't been bleeding so much in the way of manpower and um, material. And I would say, by the way, it would have been a lot tougher to crack if Hitler hadn't had the bright idea to conduct the Battle of the Bulge and lose a lot of good equipment and good soldiers, not in the sense that they were moral soldiers, but they were experienced. That was all gone now. It was just the end game. But and then also the German 19th Army was evacuated into Germany, and this was when the final Rhine River Bridge was blown in the Colmar pocket of France. So the only thing left now was the Rhine, to cross the Rhine River and then go into the Ruhr Valley, get into Germany proper, and just, finally stop the dream. Well, my dream of having a video on this day is over. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'll see you tomorrow.